Carbohydrates are another type of molecule that's found in food. And carbohydrates, just like the name implies, contains carbon, and if you think about the word hydrate, it kind of sounds like water. So it's carbon, a certain amount of carbon in the formula, and then twice as many hydrogen as there are oxygen. So carbohydrate has 2 times the amount of hydrogen as there are oxygen. And carbohydrates include things such as sugars, starches, and fibers. The difference between these are the length of how many sugars are combined together. So sugars tend to be pretty short chains of these molecules. Starches are longer and fibers are longer yet. And so the longer the chain is, the harder it is for our body to break it down. So carbohydrates are made of 5 or 6 membered rings. So our carbons and oxygens are located in kind of a circular or in a ring shape. Each ring contains at least 1 oxygen atom, and all of them contain alcohol functional groups. Okay, so some of these rings are just by themselves, or there's 2 or more rings linked together. And that's what makes up our carbohydrates. So these are pretty easy to recognize when you look at them because we have these rings of carbon atoms with lots of oxygen and hydrogen. Okay, so we have examples here. So glucose. Okay, glucose is a 6-membered carbon and oxygen ring. So we've got 5 carbons, 1 oxygen that are linked together. You'll notice the alcohol groups that come off of them. So there's lots of OH groups. Okay. And if we look at fructose, fructose is a 5-membered carbon and oxygen ring. So we've got 4 carbons in the ring with 1 oxygen. And again, we have lots of hydroxide groups attached, or sorry, not hydroxide, alcohol groups attached to our ring. Okay, now you'll notice that we have some that are labeled alpha and beta. Again, this isn't an essential difference for you to know, but just so that you can see why it's labeled alpha and beta. So our alpha group, okay, you'll notice that the alcohol group right next to the oxygen is pointing down, and the beta, the alcohol group right next to the oxygen, is pointing up. Okay, so that's the difference between our alpha and our beta. If we look at fructose, okay, so here for our fructose, it has to do with the CH2OH, the position of that, our alpha and our beta. Sucrose, okay, if you look at sucrose, sucrose is a glucose, so we've got 1 glucose sugar, and we have 1 fructose sugar. That are linked together, and that's what makes sucrose. Okay. And if we go to cellulose, which is the cell walls in plants, okay, the cell walls in plants, we have lots and lots of our glucose molecules linked together, and this N here that means that it's a long repeating chain. So over and over and over, we have a very long chain of our cellulose molecule. Now we do have a mistake in, this is actually lactose, okay? And lactose, which is the sugar that you find in milk, is actually galactose. Oops, sorry. Let's spell it correctly. Galactose. And a glucose molecule mixed together, bonded together. Okay. So lactose, galactose, and glucose. If we're talking about sucrose, it's glucose and fructose that are linked together. Okay, and we can recognize these. They're different from our fatty acids, which have the long carbon tail. They're different from proteins because we have our amino acids with our carbonyl groups. Here we have rings with lots of alcohol groups.